Welcome to Inside the Arena, your source for everything off the ice, off the court, and outside the field of play. With your hosts, KOMO Sports Director Niko Tamurian and KOMO Senior Reporter Chris Daniels.
My favorite part.
We're back again for episode number 9. And you know what? This week, we're not only on every audio, YouTube, the CW, but on the mothership, KOMO TV.
Wow.
Yeah, we're hitting them all this week. We've already gone around the corners, around the bases without even touching the four corners.
That's my favorite part. But yeah, I mean, and that's something that we really want to start doing more of. And from the standpoint of we're touching everything in Seattle sports, and what better way to show folks what we're up to than after a big football game being here on KOMO.
Yeah, everything off the air, off the ice, off the field of play, off the court. That's what we're talking about here on Inside the Arena, the business of sports, philanthropy involved in our local sports community. We've been doing it every week. And again, now on a weekly basis here on episode number 9. And we have a bit of a special episode this week in terms of what we're going to talk about because a lot of people are interested in the Sonic story. But first, you know what we have to do every week, and that's touch them all. We hit the four corners, right?
Absolutely. Let's do it. You want me to kick it off?
Yeah, everything that is good and bad, right? So we always start on the good side of things as we go to first base, so to speak.
Yeah, and I want to start with the Mariners. Listen, trade deadline has come and gone by this point, and I want to say that I like what they did. And I understand that won't be a very positive thing with every sports fan out there, especially Mariner fans that have been probably the most patient fan base in American professional sports. But I like what they did within the confines of what was available to them. Would I have loved Vladimir Guerrero Jr. to be wearing a Mariners jersey at that series in Boston or back here against the Phillies for the weekend? Yes, I was getting myself excited about that. But the reality is him and Luis Robert and some other big names out there just simply weren't reasonably available. And I know some fans will say, well, you got to go all in, you got to win right now, but you have to be reasonable about it. I like what they did. They bolstered the bullpen. I think Randy Arozarena will be a nice fit. He has certainly played well at T-Mobile Park before, which has suddenly become a thing. Can the guy hit at T-Mobile Park? Randy has done that. So by and large, I'd give it a B+ what the Mariners did at the trade deadline. I like what they did. That's my positive.
Well, we will see on Randy Arozarena, who came into the organization at number 2 already in home runs, but with more strikeouts than hits.
Yes.
So it depends on if you want to look at Trident's up or Trident's down in this case.
Time will tell.
Well, let's look at what else is up. And I got to give a shout out this week to the Seattle Seawolves.
How about them?
The local rugby team. They defeated the Dallas Jackals to win the West. I love the names in Major League Rugby.
Me too.
And they advance now to the title game against the New England Free Jacks Sunday in San Diego. Kind of a bummer that they're not going to be at Starfire Stadium for the local fans, but it's a win nonetheless. Another championship game for our local rugby team.
Yeah, and I want to give them props as well. I think it's a really cool thing to see. It's a fun sport. I'll admit that I didn't know a ton about it before I started covering the Seawolves, and now that I at least marginally understand every little thing that's going on, I really enjoy it. And when they are at Starfire, the atmosphere is electric. To your point, it's kind of a shame they're not there.
What else is a shame as we head around second into third?
You know what's a shame? And I know I've said this before on this show. I just hate that this is the time of year I'm supposed to be so excited about football. And I am. I can't wait to see what happens. I'm just mad that it's not the Pac-12 that we know and love. And I know we've talked about this a little bit, but it kind of, as we see the Huskies opening up practice this week, as the same thing with the Cougs and teams around the country for that matter, I just lament that we're getting ready for this football season that makes no sense. With, Stanford and Cal playing in the Atlantic Coast Conference, the Huskies going out to New Jersey to play Rutgers. I mean, come on. I'll tell you what, in that new NCAA football game, I'm just going to recreate the Pac-12 as we know and love it. And at least in a virtual form, I can enjoy this football season. But that's football season will be fun. It always will be. I'll say this, as much as I lament that. I think 7.5 point favorites. That's what the Dogs are over the Cougs in the Apple Cup at Lumen. I think that's a little overdone. I think the Cougs cover that.
Oh, wow.
Without having seen a single snap of practice of either team just yet.
The tier era.
hey, multifaceted guy.
Yeah.
We'll see what they do with him.
Well, I don't know when people are listening to this or viewing it, but the Huskies officially join the Big Ten Conference
Yes.
on Friday, the 2nd. So a lot of changes. It's all happening right now. The one thing I wanted to point out that is negative, and there's some irony in saying all this, is, I don't know if people have been watching the Olympics, but it's tough to watch them on linear television anymore. After what I've seen on Peacock, this is kind of the positive mixed in with the negative. Boy, Peacock really is showing, I think, for a lot of people, what can happen in the streaming world with the ability. NBC and Peacock have done a great job building that platform, the user interface. You can go home and watch the Olympics now whenever the heck you want. You can watch them live. You can watch the sport. I've been watching a lot of women's rugby.
Right.
I've been watching handball, badminton, great stuff. And you can watch every single country, all the highlights. Boy, it's been fun to watch the Olympics on Peacock.
Wow. Could you imagine
See what I just did there?
Yes. But could you imagine doing that 10 years ago?
No. Hey, I was at the Olympics 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And everything was 12 hours ahead, and you couldn't talk about what you just saw because it was going to be on NBC a half a day later. So, yeah, it's been fun to watch. And you know what else has been fun to watch?
What's that?
As we've covered it all here every week on Inside the Arena, that's the ongoing saga about bringing the Supersonics back. And I think a lot of people are waiting for that to happen again here in Seattle. But we don't want to just use 1 minute on this subject this week, do we?
No, I think that it's important because you have been on the story for since before they left, obviously, and you've been covering the team since, when they were actually playing here. And I think that it's about time that we look at this from the big picture. Okay, you and I, and we've been relaying to fans, not just here in recent months as it's really heated up, but we've really been looking at this the last few years and looking at every signing. Kudos to Commissioner Adam Silver for making that easy because he stuck to his timeline and he's added, anecdotes every time they hit a milestone. Like, okay, now we're going to do this now, and he's made it really easy to follow in that perspective. But what I want to spend this show on today is the fan at home that just wants their Sonics back, that has seen the near misses in time since that has been heartbroken in 16 years. And so let's call this, looking at this, the realistic return of the Sonics, how we approach it, what fans need to know. And so I want to start with that for you, Chris, you've been on the story 20 years and then some, looking at everything we know right now. For a fan out there that has said, okay, I thought we were close with the Soto Arena stuff. I thought we were close when, the guy, when Clay Bennett tried to move him out, and I thought we were going to maybe get to keep it, and that didn't work. All these different things have not gone Seattle's way. What would you say to fans that would make this time around? Certainly I know the answer, but what would you say to a fan that makes this time right now different from those?
Well, there is an arena and there is money that we know is in this community to buy a team, pay for an expansion franchise. It was always this chicken or the egg thing dating back years, and we can talk about this about, well, you need a new arena to make a team sustainable long term, or you need to have the team to build the arena. That's what we saw in the whole debate with Soto. This is different because one of those pieces of the puzzle is already in place. Presumably, a Sonics franchise will play at Climate Pledge Arena. And so now we have heard what Adam Silver has said. We have heard him say that the expansion process will begin, in his words, in earnest in the fall after there is a TV digital rights deal. A TV digital rights deal has been announced involving Amazon, which, oh, by the way, has the naming rights on the arena at Seattle Center, has also been involved in other sports. A lot of these T's have been crossed and I's have been dotted at this point. And now it's just a question of some of these quirky elements. There is a lawsuit now that has been filed by Warner Brothers Discovery against the NBA over what they believe are their matching rights with Amazon. So there's a question of whether that will delay this process past the fall. And there's just a question of money. We're talking about a lot of money and getting a return on the investment. And we're talking about an expansion fee that could be $4 or $5 billion. But I can tell you, Niko, after all of these years, I know that there have been a lot of conversations as the kids like to say, on the down low, happening here in town, getting all the pieces in place for when the NBA officially says they're open for business. You will see the floodgates open here.
And I want to point out, I think, for fans that everything you're mentioning, the huge amount of money for the expansion fee, all these different things, this isn't something that has been put together overnight. I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong on that, I mean, this has been being worked on and put together since even before the Kraken officially got here. And certainly that was its own thing. Take us through just how long this plan, which we hope is about to come to fruition, has been in the works.
Well, I mean, we can go back here several years, dating all the way back to 2005. That's how I line this up. I mean, there are people who even go back further than that in how we came to this point. But in terms of this particular arena and what has become Climate Pledge Arena, we're talking early 2017 is when the city sought requests for proposals for a new building. And there's a lot of history that gets to that point. But they asked for bids on a renovated key arena or a new building at Seattle Center. And they got a couple of bids. And one was from AEG, which the city had done business with before. But then there was this startup, the Oakview Group, that really was a startup with the exception of Tim Lewicki, who had experience with AEG and had experience with major franchises across the country. He was a known entity, but he was basically one of two employees with this startup. And they won the bid, not only because they were saying they could privately fund this, but because they said they were going to build it as an NHL and NBA facility. And that was all going to be part of the equation, that there was going to be an NBA franchise that played there. You and I have both seen the future NBA locker room. And so in 2017, they win that bid. The Key Arena legislation actually went into 2018, September of 2018. And then you know what happened from there. The NHL franchise was awarded. That also simultaneously triggered the groundbreaking of Climate Pledge Arena when the Kraken were awarded on December 4th of 2018. Ground was broken on that building one day later. I remember flying back from Sea Island, Georgia, after the announcement of the new franchise for the Seattle and the what became the Kraken for the groundbreaking. And, that was, they were trying to get that done by 2020. Thankfully, they didn't because we saw what the pandemic did in getting that building done. And then in 2021, just before the start of that first season for the Kraken, there's a new building. And we have now seen the NBA try it out, kick the tires, so to speak, hold a couple of preseason exhibition games with the LA Clippers, with Steve Ballmer, who, oh, by the way, has so much history in this story and other attempts to get an NBA franchise. He has served as the host for those games. He will host another one in the fall when, by the way, as we were saying off the top, we could have an expansion process underway. So, Niko, the thing that keeps me going on this story is it's not just sports fans that have cared about this over the years. It's the people that watch KOMO News on a regular basis and question authority and question accountability of public officials. This has all been a story about public spending and transportation and priorities and civic pride. They all have come together with fandom and social media, and there are people in all walks of life who have stopped me and asked me, "Hey, when are the Sonics coming back?" I'm always surprised by that. I covered a story about flooding in the Snoqualmie Valley, and I'm walking out with the owner of the field, and she says to me, one thing before you leave, thanks for coming in and talking about my issues here in Snoqualmie Valley, but one thing before you leave, when are the Sonics coming back? And I said, excuse me? And she said, yeah, all I do on social media is follow agricultural accounts, and you're the one account I follow just so I can know when the Sonics are coming back. From a farmer in Snoqualmie Valley. I call people about, as you know, a lot of government accountability issues, and I will get a hold of somebody in Olympia, and the first question they will ask me, when are the Sonics coming back? Marilyn Strickland, the former mayor of Tacoma, who's now in Congress. Every time I talk to her, when are the Sonics coming back? It comes from all corners of this community because I think there is a feeling of a civic loss that came with this franchise. The first pro sports franchise of the Big Four back in 1967. This was Seattle's baby. And so I think a lot of people that have history in this community feel like there was something ripped out back in 2008. And that's why we are close now. And I think so many people care about what is about to happen.
No question. And that's just it. Like, listen, I'm always so excited that we're going to have, hopefully, this franchise back soon. And you say, hopefully, it feels closer than ever. We'll talk about that. And we already have. But you're right. Like, this is a community thing. There's still Sonics gear being worn all over Seattle. And I wanted to go back to what we were talking about with the arena, with the NBA locker room. I always remember I was talking with Todd Lywicki about this, and and this is the NBA locker room. This is what we're hoping. And first of all, I love that they did that. It just shows the long-term planning. But my favorite, in pure Todd fantastic fashion, I'm like, well, do you mind if we take a look? Just kind of like thinking he's going to say no. And he's like, well, let me see if I have the key. He just opens the door. And one thing I want to point out to fans that I tell them, which just shows the long-term planning of hopefully getting this franchise back. And again, seems closer than ever. You know, they made that space to the point it's storage at the moment, but it will be the largest NBA locker room. Like, to have the foresight to do that, I think is super cool.
Well, and you know this from being in the bowels of the arena that the Kraken locker room is amazing.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And we're talking about the opposite side of the arena is where they've carved out the spot for the Sonics, the future NBA franchise. It has that nameplate, and it's right next to the Storm. So that there are two basketball locker rooms on that side, and it's a huge space being used as storage right now. But they're going to have to take all that stuff out of storage.
You have to find new storage
if all goes according to plan.
Absolutely. You know, one thing I want to look at from this perspective too, and again, it's all in this idea that a lot of folks watching this may be like, you know what, I'm sick and tired of hearing about hopefullys and the maybes. And I know we've talked about it. And when I ask you this, why is this closer than we've ever been? I want to ask it with the background of what you hear. Listen, I know it's closer than ever because the arena is solved and things like that. And I suspect not all, but some fans know that. But from what you hear from your contacts at the NBA and whatever else, whoever you talk to on that front, and again, I know this, but I'm saying, why in that regard does this feel closer than ever?
Well, you and I have talked about this off air, but there's always this interesting thing with the NBA when you know I've been to multiple press conferences back in New York and other spots around the country, and they're either really warm to Seattle or not so warm to Seattle, and you can feel that difference now versus what we saw in the years, the David Stern years. There was always this kind of hot and cold mentality about Seattle as an NBA market. Stern was really cold to Seattle back when the Sonics were about to leave town in 05, 06, 07, 08. He warmed up to the idea in 10, 11, and 12 when it looked like the Sonics were potentially going to come back as the then Sacramento Kings, the current Sacramento Kings. And so there was always a change in approach. And that's what makes what Adam Silver has said publicly so different than what others have said in the past, that they want to return to Seattle. He has mentioned Seattle all the time in the last year when he gets questioned about potential future landing spots for an expansion franchise. The tone has been way different out of corporate headquarters. There have been conversations between the corporate headquarters back in New York and folks locally. The arena is now here. Just everything is lined up. It is a 180 from what we saw not only back in 2008 but 2013. Both kind of those pivot points, so to speak, in this whole story.
Speaking of the whole story, one of my, I don't want to call it favorite parts because it's in a vein that isn't so great for our city, but one of my favorite parts for you as a friend was in Sonics Gate. And you're absolutely grilling David Stern, the late David Stern. And from the standpoint of like, why wasn't there more transparency? I want you to take me back to that press conference. First of all, how angry are you? And you just take me through the whole thing.
So if there's one moment in my career that I get asked about more than any other, it is that press conference, and none of it was planned. So just to give a quick synopsis, really the wheels were set in motion for the Sonics to leave Seattle. And it's kind of crazy to think about this, but with Hurricane Katrina back in 2005, if people remember what happened in New Orleans, there was also a NBA franchise that was playing there that had to find a place to play in a hurry with all the horrible things that had happened in New Orleans. And Clay Bennett, this guy from Oklahoma City, says, "Hey, let's bring the NBA to Oklahoma City. We can support it. We've got a new arena." And that whole process with the way Oklahoma City supported the Hornets at the time and the issues that Howard Schultz was having with getting any sort of support for an arena, that really was the context for what happened in 2008. And there's a bunch of steps in this process that we'll skip. But it takes us to a press conference with David Stern had flown out to Olympia to lobby for a new arena, was rebuffed by the Speaker of the House. He never forgot that. He always brought it up about Frank Chop and the Speaker, and the city of Seattle didn't support me. And so we get to April of 2008, and the NBA is deciding, okay, we're gonna vote on this proposal from Clay Bennett to move the Sonics to Oklahoma City. And this is all pre-Twitter, pre-Facebook, pre-social media. We are back in New York City at the St. Regis Hotel. And I said to the photographer that was with me, we're going to be doing a lot here because the station has spent a lot of money to fly out here and cover this. And he said, "Okay, well, what do you mean by that?" I said, "We'll probably be in every show and we'll be doing a lot of different pieces." And he said, okay, I understand. So we go into this press conference in the bottom of the St. Regis Hotel, pre-social media and cell phone coverage, not great. And go into this room that's lit for television. And I'm kind of in a hurry running between things and sit down. And there's so much I would handle differently now than I did in 2008. But I was basically asking questions of David Stern that I thought were pretty basic.
They were.
There were, questions about emails that Clay Bennett had exchanged back and forth, and saying he was a man possessed about bringing the team to Oklahoma City. There were questions about the Steve Ballmer group building something new and whether that was viable. I thought these were basic questions that the NBA had not asked. They were not meant to be confrontational, but they were questions that David Stern did not want to hear. And as this is all going on, I had no idea that this was being broadcast to every radio station and TV station across the country. I just thought I was in a room and they had some lights up and NBA TV was there, but nobody was really paying attention to this. So David Stern, at a certain point, when I'm asking these basic questions, and you gave a plug to Sonicsgate, it's all in Sonicsgate, said, "Live or not, I don't like to be interrupted." And that was his answer to a question, basically saying, "I don't want to talk to you anymore, and we're going to move on." And you have to make a split-second decision in a moment like that. Do I want to kick it up a notch or not? But I thought what he said kind of made the impression that needed to be made, that he was not going to answer these questions. And I come out of that room, and I look at the photographer, Mike Backety, and he has a big old smile on his face and said, "How did that go for you?" And I said, "I don't know, it was a little different, not what I expected." And he goes, "Well, you just paid for the whole trip." And I go to my computer and I go to my phone, and they just lit up with all these messages saying, "Thank you for sticking up for Seattle." None of that was planned. I just thought I was asking basic questions that had not been asked, and it just took on a life of its own. And as you know, there was a federal trial a couple of months later that started with the city of Seattle trying to keep the Sonics and the Professional Basketball Club, LLC, Bennett's group, to stay true to their lease until 2010. And we get to a day, July 2nd, 2008, the city of Seattle settled with Clay Bennett and allowed him for $45 million for his group to take the Sonics and go to Oklahoma City. And, one of the things I will never forget about that day is the fact that George Michael played Key Arena. And I went to the George Michael concert and heard him talk about having faith and all that stuff, looking up at the banners in the ceiling all the championship banners and the retired numbers and all that. And I thought, this is just weird that we just went through this entire sprint through all of this and the press conference and all of that. And there was no end to the story on that day.
How did the way things went down maybe enhance the idea that we could be awarded an expansion club?
Well, to that question, to the question you posed earlier, why so many people are just fatigued by all of this is because I covered it and people went through it back in 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, and enough time has passed. So David Stern is not involved anymore. There's a different ownership group that's involved. A different commissioner involved, different people at the league office involved. Everybody's saying the right thing, and I want to give a little bit of credit to Jamal Crawford, who has kept that fire burning in Seattle and brought NBA players to Seattle on a regular basis during the summer. We saw LeBron James a couple of years ago. We have seen the entire LA Clippers come up here at one point, and allowed fans to continue to see NBA basketball. That is not an understatement. I think that has kept the fires burning for a different generation, for kids who have not watched the Sonics, who have been able to come see players during the summer that they can identify with and watch on TV. I think that it can't be understated that has helped keep the fire burning and keep interest, and also keep the NBA interested in Seattle's market.
No question about it. Hey, can we get hooked up with the final buzzer here?
Oh, wait. Final buzzer. Here we go.
Oh, I love that sound effect. But it's, hopefully it's in a good way, because my final buzzer is still staying on this topic. So many fans probably listened and watched everything. We said, okay, so when are they coming back? And if we had a crystal ball, we would say January 1, 20. Give me what you think. And I understand there's variables such as the Turner lawsuit and all things like that. But let's take a little bit of a ballpark and an educated guess on when we may be hearing something more about the expansion committee, and of course, ultimately, hopefully, awarding Seattle a club.
Well, I think August, everybody's going to go their separate ways on vacation. September, October, NBA, NHL, training camps start to get back together. There'll be a Board of Governors meeting. I think we're looking at potentially some sort of discussion around that NBA exhibition game, October the 11th at Climate Pledge Arena. And it's going to be interesting who's on that expansion committee. I would not put it past the NBA to have Clay Bennett on that expansion committee making a decision about returning the Sonics to Seattle. And wouldn't that be delicious for this Supersonics saga after all these years?
Clay, you owe us, buddy, if you're on the committee. Just want to say. Chris, appreciate the insight, my friend. That was a lot of fun. And hopefully for everybody watching, you got a little bit of the background on what's to come, hopefully in the next few months.
And we're back every week on all your favorite platforms. Niko and I love doing this, bringing you behind the curtain, so to speak. And we have some special shows the next couple of weeks you'll want to listen to.
Yeah, we usually have a couple guests on here talking about the things that make Seattle sports great. So my interview was Chris this week. Because you know the Sonic story, man.
Yeah. Well, hey, David Lee, he usually takes us out. Let's look.
You've been listening to Inside the Arena with Niko and Chris. Please subscribe on your favorite platform. Until next time.